From September 11th to the Great Recession, from Katrina to government shutdowns, small businesses have been battling stresses and shocks. Through grit to innovation, they have sustained local economies with their resilience. Now, they face an unprecedented threat, COVID-19. As Congress scrambles to provide aid, coronavirus economic relief packages are overlooking millions of micro-businesses. Many of these businesses are owned by people of color, veterans, immigrants, and others who operate in low and moderate income communities. During the best of times, they face hardships in gaining access to the resources needed to thrive, grow, and hire. Their remarkable innovation to provide economic freedom for their families is on full display. What will you do to support the heartbeat of the nation's economy?
Hi. I don't think you'll find me on your schedule for today, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity. It is the last session of our conference, the last day of the conference, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity to thank you for allowing us into your home. This conference has been an amazing event and a series of conversations that have been so provocative and innovative. And we heard you. We heard from so many of you how much you were enjoying the conference. And it makes me very, very proud and delighted. We want to make sure we're able to continue these conversations. And so I hope you will find ways to join us and stay a part of the AEO community and continue to engage in these conversations. Because of taking the conference to a virtual event, we were able to reach so many more people than who are outside really of the general micro business community. And we are really, really happy about that. We, each week since May 25th, I believe, May 24th, we have convened over 40,000 individuals who participated in this conference every week. That is an amazing reach of people. And it wasn't just, as I mentioned, just the microfinance and micro business community. There have been investors and foundation executives, bankers, politicians at the local level, and many, many more, including amazing, resilient business owners who have joined us. This conference is historic for a number of reasons. Not only because of the reach that I just talked about, over 40,000, 49,000 in 1 week that we've reached, but also it's historic because of what's happening in our community. We have a health pandemic that is causing tremendous challenges and stress. We also are in the midst of civil unrest, inequalities that are just moving in such a way that we may experience real change coming. It's an amazing, amazing period. And even though our conference is ending today, the work really is just starting. I'm sure many of you, this is not your first session, and so you are familiar with the ending of our video that says, "What will you do?" And so I want to give you some ideas to think about what you can do, how you can help keep these small businesses resilient in their communities. One way is to be an advocate. Some of you may not have thought about that you have a role in advocating for policies. You heard at our conference a lot of the policies that AEO is supporting, along with many of our partners who've appeared. You can join AEO and become an advocate as you are a member with AEO. You can also join Page 30 Coalition. The Page 30 Coalition is fighting right now to make changes in the government's response, our federal government response to what's happening to businesses right here, right now. Please go to page 30 coalition.org. Join AEO by going to aeoworks.org. Because of this current environment, we need all types of partners. I want to also acknowledge and thank PayPal for being a partner with AEO that brought $10 million to support Black-owned businesses with grants at this time. Now, the reality is we had over $200 million in requests up against the $10 million we had to provide. We want to do more. We're exploring ways to do more. But again, we want to at least acknowledge PayPal for their tremendous commitment and their continued work and partnership with AEO to do more to support Black and Brown-owned businesses throughout the country. Lastly, as I think about partnerships and think about how AEO has been able to provide a platform for these incredible conversations over the last 4 weeks, I want to acknowledge and thank our sponsors. It really were the sponsors that allowed us to have this incredible reach and expand our platform. We thank them for supporting our transition from what was supposed to be in Houston to this virtual event. I want to thank our speakers. We had nearly 90 amazing, incredible, extraordinary speakers to bring you their reflections and content and expertise. And we are deeply, deeply thankful and indebted to them for their participation and engagement. The co-chairs of this conference were key in helping us plan it. Melissa Bradley from the AEO board, Valerie Mosley, and last but certainly not least, Michaelia Davis from the Certina Foundation. She has been an extraordinary co-chair and with us throughout the entire conference. And she'll be back with you, I think, a little later. The AEO team is not last, but they are certainly not least. We thank that whole AEO team. You have seen some of them have been only in the background, but we could not have pulled off this conference without an amazing team that is part of the AEO staff. And of course, our conference team, the studio, all of the people who have helped us with this production. Again, you have our deepest gratitude. As I close, again, I want to encourage you all to stay involved, to form new partnerships. One of the things that AEO always says about its conferences, it is a place where people can come and partner smarter, execute better, and innovate faster. You're about to hear one more panel who will talk about some of the innovations and things they are doing around food. Lots of opportunities for innovation and partnership. And then you'll hear also later about innovations taking place at AEO, things that we hope will be tools and innovations that you can use. And then lastly, and this time it is my last thought and my last comment, I want to just thank all the business owners out there. I want to thank you for your resilience, for your fortitude. We know this is challenging times, but we hear and we see your resilience. Please check out AEO Works and Main Street Rise. We've provided a lot of tools. We keep adding more tools because as more and more people hear what's needed to assist businesses, these Main Street micro businesses, they're calling upon AEO and say, how can I partner? What can I do? What can I bring? And so stay tuned to Main Street Rise. More and more partnerships are showing up there, and more solutions are being provided to business owners. Thank you again for participating and engaging with the AEO conference. Stay tuned. Enjoy the rest of the conference day.
I can see the future painted in my eyes. Open up the door and fade into the light. Dive into a world I know. Take my hand and follow me into the sun. There's no end. This is where we come alive. This is where we go, my life. This is where we go. This is where we go.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you are all here joining me for the last session of the AEO conference. We just had an opportunity to hear some words from Connie about just all the 90 speakers, amazing speakers. I was here on the first week, and now I'm closing it out, so I feel very honored to have that position to be a bookend to how this wonderful conference started. But this conference is all about you, so it is so amazing that we're able to have these conversations, bring together some really thoughtful leadership to really think about what's next, what do we need, where do we go from here, and to vision how we can build a new future that is more inclusive and sustainable and make sure that has access to everyone. So thank you all for participating. Thank you to the sponsors. I definitely want to give a shout out to all of the staff, Roland Martin staff, the AEO staff. This has just been incredible to be a part of, and I feel so blessed and so lucky that you all selected me to be a part of this. You all have been working hard, and you definitely should be proud, because I've been to a lot of virtual conference over this time, and this is one of the best ones. So I just want to give everybody a shout out. I want to introduce myself. My name is Elaine Rasmussen. I am the CEO of Social Impact Strategies Group. We are a consulting and facilitation firm that directly works on inclusive economic development. We also provide racial and social impact equity audits and implementation. So we help you figure out what are the policies, practices, and procedures that you need to change to actually build equity within your organization, your program, or your initiative. We also provide investor education on help you how to align your values with your money beyond your philanthropy. We also work with second stage and early growth businesses to help them get to the next level. All in all, we help you do different better. And I'm so honored to be on this with this amazing panel of folks here today talking about food in the new economy. Joining me, I'm going to have them actually do their own introductions, but I'm going to kick it off over to Brenda Williams, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves before we start to get into the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Elaine. I am Brenda Williams, and I'm with Communities Unlimited, and I am located here in the Mid-South Delta region. And I am excited to be here to be part of this panel today to talk about equity in a new food economy.
And can you tell us a little bit more about your organization, what you all do, and what's the lens that you are going to be bringing to this conversation?
Certainly. As we all know, the COVID-19 has sent American agriculture into chaos. We've all heard the stories of cows still having to be milked, but dairy farmers dumping millions of gallons of their output. Endless acres of lettuce remain unpicked at the peak of the harvest, and we've seen the pictures on TV of tractors that are destroying their crops. They're plowing them back into the ground. and people are lining up in their cars for emergency drive-through food distributions at food banks across the country. And we know that there are many farmers that are struggling, that have been left out of the initial federal aid, and some who've received assistance but are still hurting with COVID-19 losses. But what we do, Communities Unlimited, we are the organization that we are familiar with the small scale grower, and we know them personally. We're working with about 52 growers, and we know about some of their challenges, and we have a genuine interest in learning about their farms and fulfilling the role in the local and the regional food access. So I am here in the Mississippi Delta, where I'm working with small scale growers, and they're
I think she's coming back. Brenda, are you with us? Well, we're gonna move on to Davida, and if we get Brenda back, we'll allow her to come circle back and finish her thought. So, Davida Davison, please tell us more about your organization, what you're doing, and what's the lens you're going to be bringing into this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Elaine. It's always good to be in conversation with you specifically, and it's even a delight for me, even more so, that we have the opportunity to be on the AEO platform. And so I'm excited to be on this panel with these amazing women. And so my name is Davida Davison, and I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Food Lab Detroit. And as I indicated, Food Lab is a nonprofit. And what we do is we foster the creation of an inclusive and equitable local food economy here in Detroit. And so the lens that I will be coming from today, and what I hope to add to the conversation, is basically our goals at Food Lab Detroit. And that is, how do we create a local food economy that acknowledges the importance of three things: food justice, community health, local ownership, and yes, sustainability. And so in our work at Food Lab Detroit, how we do our work is that we seek out and we support dedicated leaders who want to deepen their vision around the impact of how do we build a healthier, more equitable, and more sustainable food system. And so we provide chefs and cooks and restaurateurs with a couple of things, and I'll end here, is that we provide them with a paid, stipend-driven 6-month fellowship opportunity. We provide education and resources. We provide peer-to-peer mentoring. And most importantly, we have an exchange of experiences around our cohort. And we are primarily focused on incubating and supporting and lifting up those food businesses that are women-owned and also from communities of color. So really excited to take part of this conversation, and really excited to dig in, like, what does this new food economy look like amid and post COVID-19? So thanks.
Thank you, Davida. Always lovely to share space with you. I apologize because I did not get a chance to connect with this person as we were getting ready. So please, Ms. Cousins, please tell me how to pronounce your first name.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's Eartherin Cousin, and I'm so pleased to have this opportunity. I said, like Catherine, Eartherin. But I'm pleased to have this opportunity to participate with this panel and discussing the food system. Because today, what COVID laid bare for the world is that our food system is failing. And our food system is failing, particularly low-income and underserved people across America, and particularly communities of color. I've had the privilege of working for the past 25 years, both domestically and internationally, on food system related issues and including working with the United Nations as the head of the World Food Program. After leaving the World Food Program with a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation and support from organizations like Stanford University and BCG, we began to look at why was our food system failing and what market-driven solutions could we develop that would ensure access to nutritious food for low-income populations, both domestically and internationally, but also provide an opportunity to grow businesses that are owned by those who live and work in these communities. And we've stood up a new organization called Food Systems for the Future. And we are located in Chicago, and our goal is to catalyze, enable, and scale market-driven ag tech, food tech, and innovations that can improve nutritious outcomes by increasing demand for and making nutritious food available and affordable to low-income communities, and that can grow businesses for those occupants in the community and grow employment opportunities. I'm looking forward to talking more about our work as we proceed with the conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we did get Brenda back, so I want to let Brenda finish her thought before, and then we'll round it out with Jen Feigl.
Thank you, Elaine. So here in the Mississippi Delta, where I'm from, small-scale minority growers right now are worried about where they're going to market their acres of produce that they planted 65 to 70 days ago to sell to institutional buyers. So if you had an opportunity to visit some of these farms, which I have, you would see all of this beautiful produce that was originally scheduled to go to the local restaurants, the colleges, and the universities. However, due to COVID-19 and the closure of the colleges and the restaurants, because of that, and that has affected the food service industry, it has forced growers to make difficult decisions on where to sell their produce. And so what the growers are looking for, the small-scale growers are looking for a profitable home for their harvest. So what we've been able to do, Communities Unlimited, through a grant from the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation, we created a project. It's Farm to Food Pantry. What we're doing, we're purchasing locally fruits and vegetables from the Mid-South Delta region, from small-scale growers, and donating it to Heartland Hands Food Pantry in Mississippi. And what we've done, we built a relationship with Heartland Hands, and so they are a food pantry, but they are also a distributor, and they distribute to about 23 community food pantries throughout 12 persistent poverty counties located in the Mississippi Delta. And that's what we're doing, one of the projects that we're working on currently here in the Mississippi Delta.
Thank you, Brenda. And we're going to bring in Jen for the layup. Jen Feigl, Commonwealth Kitchen. Good, always great to see you.
Oh, always a pleasure, Elaine. Thank you so much. And I'm thrilled to be able to bring the perspective from our folks here in Boston, which is where we are based. And so Commonwealth Kitchen, like DeVita, we're a nonprofit organization. Our focus is on building great food companies as a way to fix what is a very broken food system. Our organization's mission, and this was before COVID, this was before everything that's going on now in response to the George Floyd murder, our organization has always been about building a new food economy grounded in racial, social, and economic justice. That's the work that we do. And the way that we do that is everything from a shared kitchen with over 50 companies that are in that kitchen. 80% are owned by women and people of color. 160 people working for those companies, food trucks, caterers, product companies. And then we wrap that around with a lot of education and training, markets, permits, licensing, scaling your product, access to market. And we do a fair amount of work on helping people access markets. And so similar to what's happening in Mississippi, our work has been a lot about working in the college market and helping get the West African peanut sauce on the menu at Harvard University, getting the Mexican mole sauce on the menu at Boston Children's Hospital. So really trying to think through the supply chain all the way along from what it takes to start that food business all the way through to how can you build an actual successful company. And the work that we do historically has been about economic development. So we come at this work, and I personally come at this work having worked in economic development and housing work, and realizing that having spent 25 years as an affordable housing developer in Greater Boston, that the affordable housing program keeps poor people poor. It's a really important element to building sustainable communities and to building safety nets for people. It does not get at people out of poverty. And in fact, it disincentivizes people from getting out of poverty because they never are able to build wealth. I own my house. When I first bought my house, the mortgage was expensive, but I could figure it out. 15 years later, my income has gone up, but my mortgage hasn't. And therefore, it's actually now I'm building equity in my house. It's easier. It's affordable for me to pay. That is not true in affordable housing. And so the work that we really do is really trying to find the solutions. We are very interested in solutions, not Band-Aids. And I know we're going to talk about that today, of saying what are the things we can fundamentally do as an organization that will actually change the opportunity to build wealth, to build assets, and to build opportunity for Black, Indigenous, people of color in the city of Boston and across the nation. So that's really our work.
And that whole conversation about affordable housing and people not being able to build wealth, we'll have to talk to Connie about having a whole nother session about that, because that is a huge thing. And what I don't think people know, especially folks who like to say that people enjoy being in those situations, that they're trying not to work or they're trying not to participate. There are actually limits. You cannot have more than $2,000 in the bank. If you have $2,000 or more in the bank, you put yourself at risk to get off of these programs. And as we know, $2,000 in the bank is not enough. So we're definitely going to bug Connie to have that conversation and welcome everybody else to join us. But what I really want to do with our time together is, in the limited time together, is really make this a living room conversation. So I've got a series of questions here. We'll definitely have a Q&A session. I'm actually streaming this on Facebook Live. So if folks have questions on Facebook Live, please post them. But definitely we'll have some Q&A. But for us, we're just really, you're going to watch us in a fishbowl having a conversation. But I'm going to start off in a way that I don't usually like to start off with, is for us to really take a moment to talk about, well, first I want to give some context. For those of you who may not know, who are new to this field, I'm relatively new. I sit on the SWIFT Foundation, and a lot of the investing that we do and grant making that we do is specifically around food sovereignty and food sustainability. And it's incredible to know, and my colleagues here reminded me, that the food industry is concentrated in 4 companies. 4 companies. I mean, just let that marinate for a second. Our whole food industry is controlled by 4 companies, and I think 2 of them are in Minnesota, where I live right now. Having that stranglehold on something that touches every single one of us through multiple facets of our life throughout our day, and is consistent throughout our lives, is, to me, the monolith of that is very disheartening. How can we expect that there be equity when there's that much concentration of assets, the supply chain, and the wealth? The other thing that I really think is important, and Jen talked a little bit about this, is that the scale of the food industry and the supply chain, so including the farmers, consumer packaged goods, like we heard from Jen, restaurants, food entrepreneurs, like we heard from Davida, grocery stores, seeds, gardens. I have a little garden in my deck. But when we're talking about the food system, we are talking like the whole entire food system. And I'm so excited to have the folks, my colleagues here, who will be talking about those things from a variety of those different perspectives along the supply chain. But it's really important that we have an idea that when we're having this conversation, we're not just talking about food entrepreneurship. We're not just talking about restaurants. We're not just talking about farmers. They are all interconnected, and we cannot talk about one without talking about the others. So I want to start with the first question. And as I mentioned, I hate to start off with the problem, but let's discuss for just a few minutes, especially for those folks in our session who are very new to the food system, food conversation. What is broken in the system and or infrastructure of it accessing food for Black and Indigenous people, including entrepreneurship, food, deserts, farming, and on top of that, what has been the impact of COVID? I'm going to tee this up for Davida, and then everybody, you all can join in on this question. We'll spend a few minutes on this question.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. And so I don't want to be long because I want to make sure we have the opportunity to hear the voices from our esteemed panel. But there's one thing that I would love to do, Elaine, and that is I just want to tweak your language just a little bit. And I know you said that you don't want to start off because you typically don't start off with the problem. But I just want to tweak it a little bit. And how I want to begin this conversation is that I don't want to start it off with the problem. Elaine, I want to start it off with the origin, because the origin of the food system is so important, right?
Yeah.
And so if we look at the origin of the food system, quite frankly, our modern food system is a true regime of what I call food apartheid. It undermines our democratic and community control of our food system, right? And so let's talk about, when we talk about what's broken in our food system, the very DNA, the very roots of our food system, particularly around agriculture in America, its origins is in chattel slavery. Its origin is theft of land for first our indigenous people. Its origins is in the violent plantation culture. So when we start talking about this broken food system, it's no surprise because of its origin that we see an evolved and sophisticated continuation of that culture in today's current food system. And so what's broken about our food system, right? Number one, there's rampant exploitation of workers. And so I love, Elaine, that you talked about the entire ecosystem. We talked about the food supply chain, because there are exploitation of workers all the way to the field in our farmers, all the way to when food is delivered on your plate to the servers who provide you that food. Everywhere along the food chain is exploitation of workers. What else is broken in our food system? The displacement from land and home via gentrification and foreclosure, and the eradication of land, particularly of Black farmland. And then there's this inadequate access to high quality food, which some folks like to call food desert. That terminology did not come from communities, so I don't call it a food desert. I call it communities living under food apartheid, because that's what it is. And then last but not least, what's broken in our food system, and this is where I'll turn it over to the panel, is that what is wrong with our food system is this reinforced kind of racist, anti-Black and brown, racialized food policy that we all live under currently right now. So those are just a few things that's the problem that stems from the origin of the food system and the agriculture industry here in the United States of America. So I'll turn it over to my panel.
Eartherin.
Well, Eartherin. Thank you. And let me just build on a bit of what Davida has just said. In reality, when you talk about land and who's farming today, less than 2% of the farmers today are Black. And you think about the origins of farming in the 1800s, 90% of Black people lived on farms. Today, less than 2% actually operate farms. The reality is that when we think about investment, and that's where I'm coming from here, there are others who can speak, as Davida has done, to some of the more community-related issues. Let me speak about the money. In reality, we know that if you look at the 209 deals in agriculture last year that were invested in by venture capital firms, less than 0.1% went to people of color. And we know that when we talk about African American business women business owners, that some 46% of all businesses are owned by women of color. Yet we know that they only generate 20% of the revenues of all businesses, of all small businesses owned by women. And we know that if the capitalization that goes to small businesses was equalized just among women of color who own businesses, that we would increase our revenues by $1.1 trillion is what women would contribute to the economy, and about 3.8 million new jobs. The reality is, though, that most of our businesses are not in the food space. We need to ensure that we are bringing more Black and Brown owned businesses across the entire food system, not just from the farm, but through distribution, through food processing, through and as well as into retail. And wholesaling opportunities that will create new businesses across the food system beyond the four that you talked about and that Davita underscored, that will provide for a more local and regional food system that can not only provide more nutritious food, but also provide more economic opportunity.
And I just want to tie that into actually how you started the conversation with capital, right? So, are we not, we have a great economy with Black and Brown women in the food business, but under the radar. We have women, Black and Brown women who are in the food industry, and as Davita talked about, are marginalized. They are, likened to plantation. They are exploited, as she had mentioned. And so some of to get into some of these sectors in food, there's high capitalization. And if you already know that the capital isn't going to be coming to you, then we start to see this spiral, right, where you can't get out of the fishbowl, right, because you're just swimming around and you can't get over to get to that next stage to grow. Brenda, what are your thoughts?
I think that what I am seeing on a daily basis is something that some people would say, how are we still having this problem with 2020? It's 2020 and I am engaged with growers and minority growers from the Mississippi Delta, and some of them are still struggling with the infrastructure or the lack of infrastructure. There is no way in the Mississippi Delta, if you're a grower and you're in the South, that you're going to be able to scale up to wholesale if you don't have on-farm cooling or cool storage, or if you don't have a refrigerator truck. A lot of these growers that I am engaged with today, having conversations with them every day or every other day, how are you going to transport your wholesale market? They don't have refrigerated trucks, and they don't have on-farm cool storage. So to go up to that next level, it's almost impossible. And I think that's something that we really have to address. Why is it that so many small-scale minority growers in the Mississippi Delta do not have infrastructure in order to scale up to wholesale markets?
And so I want to turn it over to Jen, because I feel like we've kind of answered this question, but maybe there's something, there's an added layer to this. And I will just put a point on it. In Minnesota, that's been my frustration, because I feel like we're the land of consumer packaged goods, and I've had to share that notion with some of our food incubators who are having restaurants who have been devastated by the civil uprisings from George Floyd's murder and were destroyed. I said, well, who's talking to them about taking their recipes and turning them into consumer packaged goods? We are in the land of, why has not anybody done that? We have 25, I believe we have 17 corporate Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota. We like, if we can't do it, like nobody can do it. And no one's even thought of it. They keep us thinking small. And so that has been part of my frustration, is like, we're thinking too small to even provide the expertise to have these businesses grow. And so that's one of the big pushes I've been doing in our on the entrepreneur ecosystem side, but also on the investor side, because that infrastructure piece is often overlooked. It is not sexy. You can't take a picture next to it. You can't, infrastructure is, it's bridges, it's the roads. Like, no one likes the taxes to go up, but everybody wants the roads to be fixed. So I'll tee this question up to Jen. Definitely supply chain disruption is a big part of addressing the systems change for Black and brown people in the food system, all across up and down the food system. But I often, in all of the conversations about food, other than this one, I don't hear supply chain talked about. It's like a big elephant that's in the room. What is the disruption that's needed for anti-racist, equitable, a sustainable food system? Jen, I'll let you start.
Well, that's a simple conversation. That's a simple question, right? Like, I mean,
I start with the easy questions first.
Yeah, right. Make it easy. Give it to the white girl. I get it. I told you. First of all, like, we don't talk about the real cost of food, right? And this is a historical thing. Like, why is it that the farmers can't get financing? Well, because we don't talk about what the real cost of labor is for farmers. Right? We devalue the labor cost to the farmer. We devalue the land cost for farmers. We do that all the way up the supply chain, where, why is it that Black and indigenous restaurants are always the ones that are the takeout? They're never the ones that are the sit-down restaurant. Why? Access to capital, access to resources, how businesses are underwritten. When you move into the product side of things, it's the same sets of issues where, we work with businesses that are making, West African peanut sauce and Ghanaian shito sauce and Mexican mole and things that are very often unfamiliar to somebody who looks like me. And therefore, in order for that product to get on a shelf at a grocery store and then to move from the shelf on the grocery store requires a lot of money. And that money has to come from somewhere. And if you are a person of color, the likelihood of you having money or you having friends and family or networks with money is almost nothing. And now add to that the fact that we're talking about a business case where the market is really, really hard to make it. The margins are terrible. The buyers are racist, like all the way through. There's an enormous set of challenges all the way through this, right? So the reason this isn't fixed is because it's really, really hard and really, really complex. I continue to feel like, and this is where Davida, actually, Elaine, you went to this at the beginning, is like, if you look at who controls the money and where money happens within the supply chain and who's taking all that money, the people taking the money are not the farmers and they're not the producers. They're not the sauce companies. It's everybody in between. So like US Foods, Cisco, they are the two largest distributors in the country. They do almost all of the distribution. If you can't get into one of them, you are likely never going to get into any major accounts. In order to get into them, you need a certain size, you need insurance, it's all, and you need to know the right people. So you need to look a certain way and talk a certain way, right? So where does structural racism play? Well, in our industrialized, centralized food system that allows two companies to control almost the entire distribution chain. Move that into colleges and hospitals, which we all talk about. And in the world of economic development, everybody wants to talk about anchor institutions as a strategy, especially for supporting Black and minority-owned businesses, right? So look in the food industry, what that looks like. And much like in consumer packaged goods, where it's, General Mills and, and the big guys like that, and on the buyer side, it's Walmart. We'll move that into the college and hospital side. It's Sodexo and Compass and Aramark, and they control 80 or 90% of the industry. So again, you have this unbelievable consolidation of resources to a very small group of companies where at the end of the day, it's about bottom line. It's about dollars. It's about uniformity. It's about simplicity. It is not about food. It is not about health. It is not about sustainability. It is not about quality of jobs. It is not about economic opportunity. It's none of those things. And so the answer for all of this is we have to dismantle what is this centralized, industrialized food economy. We have to move ourselves into something that is regional, that is networked, that is from the community up, that it represents what our farmers are doing, and that it's based on, what people did 100 years ago, where you ate based on what was in season. You didn't just get to have a tomato no matter what time of the year it was, right? We gotta, and you've seen this in what's happened with COVID. Last thing to say, what's happened with COVID is that what you've seen is that problem in the supply chain, because there's two supply chains. There's one that's for restaurants and wholesale. That one is completely shut down, and there's plenty of food there. And then there's the supply chain that is retail and the food pantries. And that's the one that's gotten completely overwhelmed, and why you're seeing lines of people who are hungry, because these two supply chains don't connect to each other. So there's this fundamental structural issue, and that's the kind of stuff we got to get at.
And I want to take it even down to the like on the ground. So I'll give a quick story, and I'll kind of make a point on that. And I want to definitely hear from Eartherin. So we actually had our conference 2 days before the stay-at-home order here in Minnesota. Our conference was on the 13th and 14th of March. Our stay-at-home order came in on the 15th of March. And we, of course, obviously had ordered food for this conference. We always buy from local Black and brown folks to provide food for our conference. One of our vendors, one of our favorite Mexican restaurant vendors, I guess because a lot of their events had canceled, brought us so much food. Right. Like we had to give, I'm like, I cannot waste this food. We were telling all of our attendees, please take a 10 home. We don't want this. I mean, we paid for $1,200 of food. I think we probably got $2,500 worth of food, and it got so difficult to even give it away. And I'm just like, just take it and put it in your freezer. And I one of our folks who comes, they're like, you've got 6 kids, take all this food, like take it, please. But this other thing that we talked about in preparing for this is we talked about even taking that's really at a systems level, but even what's on the ground. And we talk about this infrastructure. Minnesota, we have a challenge. We don't have enough commercial kitchens, not only kitchens for entrepreneurs, but community kitchens. And the church kitchens have not been kept up. And in order to get them back up to stuff for a food entrepreneur to work out of them, it's expensive. You talk about $100,000 freezer. You talk about $100,000 stove. I mean, these are some of the things, even at the ground level, local level, if you're trying to do anything within your community to bring your community together around food, it's a lot of money. Eartherin, I'm going to get this before we're done. Eartherin, please share your thoughts.
Well, thank you. And let me start by going back to Jen. And appreciating her comments as well as yours, and saying that I'm less of a revolutionary than Jen. I'm not suggesting that we're going to dismantle the food system as it exists today in this country. But what we are going to do is diversify the food system in this country. And that it goes exactly to the point that Jen was making, that we need to invest in more businesses that can provide the augmented support for local and regional businesses that can provide support to, from the farmer through the processing, through those small processors working in those kitchens, those community kitchens that she talked about, that would give them the opportunity to scale up and to sell through new and different mechanisms. The reality of it is that we are in a very interesting time at the moment. Between COVID and Black Lives Matter, we have 2 crises that we need to ensure that we don't let good crises go to waste. We have all of these countries, companies across the country saying, what can I do to address the challenges of systemic racism? And I say, okay, I tell you what you can do. What we need to do is invest in organizations like Food Systems for the Future that is working to invest in those businesses that can't access that capital that Jen just talked about, that limit their ability to move beyond idea or seed stage actually into operational stage. Because the one thing you hear from traditional investors is that our companies are not investment ready, that they're not capital ready. And so we need to have the kind of institutions institutions like DaVita's that support the business operations and support that get those companies ready. But then we need to ensure that there is capital to help them grow. We need to move beyond businesses that can't apply for the PPP loan because they don't have any employees to businesses that actually move beyond just, as in the developing world, we call them subsistence business. They're not much more than that too often in our own communities because of lack of access to capital. And so with the organizations that are represented here today that are working with those entrepreneurs to support the development of their business, we need to augment that with capital. And then what I am in conversation with companies like those that you've been talking about today is how do we then de-risk their investment in those same businesses to give them the ability to grow. But this won't happen unless the conversations like the one that we're engaged in now, we are continuing to come together to make demands upon the existing enterprises that will ensure that we come out on the other side of this with new and additional resources. Connie talked about the $10 million she got from PayPal, but had $200 million in requests. When you see companies putting up $100 million or $10 million and you know that their annual revenue is in the billions or like Amazon almost in the trillions, then you know that we can do better than this. When you have a federal government that invests over $11 billion in subsidies on commodity crops, we know that we can demand policies from the federal government that support the kind of infrastructure and investment that in small Black and brown-owned farms that is non-existent today. And shame on us if we are simply asking for more program dollars and not investment dollars so that we can move beyond the system that we have today to supporting a system that creates not only economic development, but a food system that truly nourishes our entire community.
And I want to pick up on that point around this false perception that entrepreneurs, farmers, because I think this, once again, as you all have talked about, is all this disenfranchisement and these racist notions are all up along the food chain, right? So what I see here is that so I testified in front of our state Senate and our House of Representatives around the relief money that we were going to be giving out as a state to entrepreneurs. And one of the comments that our state senators said, I was telling my own story about how difficult the PPP program was and the SBA EIDL program. And I have a lot of privilege and advantages. English is my first language. I have an accountant. I have a bank account. I have a relationship with my banker. And it was still, I had to submit 3 times before I actually got a response. And then to talk about what is that reality for some of the other folks. We have a very huge Somali immigrant population here. And the fact that one of the senators, we talked about, like, not everybody has a computer. Not everybody keeps records digitally. And so one of the senators said, well, how can you have a business if you don't have a laptop? I mean, it's those sentiments that are just so disconnected, especially if you come from a cash culture, or if you have a restaurant that is cash based. That doesn't mean that your business isn't investable. It doesn't mean that you are not a good investment. But this is one of the reasons why we decided to also focus on investors and educating them about how they need to rethink risk, how they need to rethink how they approach a potential investment, particularly if it's with a Black and brown person, and that this is a relationship, because that's how the culture that we come from. So I love everything that you said. But I'm gonna make a right turn here, and I'm gonna toss this up to Davida. So what would it look like if we adopted an anti-racist food agriculture agenda in this country?
Wow. I mean, even when you say that, right, I start to shiver. Because it's such a tall ask, right? considering the DNA of our food system and our agriculture economy is rooted in racism. And so when I think about what does it look like for us to start to dismantle anti-Black and racist policies, that's the perspective that I'm looking at in terms of how do we get at the heart of making sure we do have a equitable, a just food economy. And so when I think about that, Elaine, I think about some of the work that activists are already doing on the ground. And that is, how are we democratizing the flow of power and wealth and resources so that we can move from this core kind of industrialized food economy to one that is truly what I would say democratized in the sense that we have a distributed network. And so I think one of the things that I love about, the conversation around capital that y'all were just having, and if folks have not had the opportunity to see it in digital, I mean, it's coming out in print on Sunday, but if folks haven't had the opportunity to see her digital essay, it is now available on the New York Times, and her name is Hannah Nicole Jones. She was responsible for the 1619 project for the New York Times. But this latest essay of hers is simply called What We Are Owed. And that's where I'm glad that y'all are having this kind of conversation around capital. Because I think one of the first things that we can do when we start to talk about what does an anti-racist food economy look like is if we start talking about what does reparations look like for Black people, right? And so when I think about HR 40, and I think about, we haven't even had the conversation around an industry, if nothing else, the agriculture and food industry was built on the backs of enslaved, my ancestors, enslaved Black people. And so at the root of it, we need to start having conversations around what reparations look like in this country for Black people. But then I want to talk about the fact that, even in the midst of this particular crisis, y'all, I'm encouraged, because here's what I do know. What I know is that as we talk about the consolidation of power as it currently exists in our food system, there are two things, Elaine, that you lifted up and you talked about these 4 companies, right, that control the food system. Well, there are two things that I was thinking about as you said that. Number one is that the 4 largest kind of beef farms control 85% of the beef that's in this country. But the two things that really stick out to me is that 85% of corn seed that is grown in this country, 85% of it comes from one company. And then soybean production, 76% of that comes from one company. Y'all, you know what that tells me? When I think about soy and I think about corn that's grown in this country, we're not even growing food in this country in the first place. We're not.
No.
And so here's where the opportunity really comes in for local farmers, is that we don't grow food in this country. And so the crop that is being grown, whether it is soy or whether it is corn, farmers don't even eat it. What they do is that they grow this so that it goes into fast food burgers. It goes into something that's called corn fructose syrup. So we're now starting to talk about candy. And every single item that you see that is produced by one of those package companies in Minnesota has corn fructose syrup in their packaging, has corn fructose syrup in their product because it's a stabilizer. So then I think about, wow, that creates a fantastic opportunity for local growers who we asked in the city of Detroit. We asked our community, it says, what is more important to you, the label organic or the label locally grown in the city of Detroit? And overwhelmingly, Detroiters said locally grown in the city of Detroit was most important. And that is because when we really start to talk about how do you create an anti-racist food system, it really has to start with the farmers and the growers. And I think that they have a tremendous opportunity, because as our food chain is buckling, I think it's also worth pointing out that there are parts of our food chain that are adapting and doing really well. And where I see that show up most, y'all, is local food system in terms of
Yeah.
how they are proving that they are resilient. So in the city of Detroit, where we have over 1,500 community farms and gardens, our urban agriculture community that has Black farmers here in the city of Detroit, these are small farms who are supplying their restaurants. Why? Because we've created a distribution channel where they can get their products to restaurants as they're starting to open. Also in the city of Detroit, one of the projects that I started when I first moved back to Detroit was something that was called Detroit Kitchen Connect, where we do have a distributed network of commercial kitchens that were lying dormant in schools and churches. So you have food entrepreneurs who are processing the food that is grown by farmers. I see the popularity of cooking at home. Google tells us the number one search right now in their search engine is recipes, where folks are starting to cook from home. I see an uptick in CSAs. I see the fact that people are actually starting to ask the question, where did this come from? Who grew it? And so I see that there right now, we are on the precipice, and we have to take advantage of this opportunity. We are on the precipice of really being able to create a new food economy. But there are just a couple of things that I should say in order to how to really grow it and how to make sure that as we're looking at a new food economy, there's some things that we're doing. Number one is we have to break up food production. We have to break up this kind of monopoly around how food is processed in this country. Beef, poultry, pork, etc. How do we do that? We have to look at antitrust laws. We have to look at FTC. Like, we have to look at laws, because laws in our system have been codified to protect big business. We have to ensure that food workers have sick pay and they have access to health care. We've already deemed them essential workers, right? We've already recognized and acknowledged and agreed that our food workers are essential. It makes no sense that the majority of food workers in this country, whether they be immigrants, whether they be people who are working on a green card, whether they be undocumented, that they don't have a pathway to citizenship and they don't have sick pay and access to health care. And I also think that one of the things that we have to recognize too, and I think Jen lifted this up, and this is where I'll close, is that the food system that is currently created right now has been created with efficiency in mind. It's not centered around people. And so the pandemic is showing us that a different food system that is anti-racist has to also be radically different from our diet. Because the food that we are producing in this country, y'all, particularly for Black and brown people, it's killing us. It literally is killing us.
Literally. And to tie that in, so I was speaking with our governor just last week, and I was lifting this up of like looking at other countries where COVID hasn't had the impact in deaths that it has in the States. And that's linked to our health. It's linked. We by and large are not a healthy country because a lot of our food is artificial, but also the other racist structures to keep us in poverty, to keep us numb, to keep us not participating in a system that we essentially rely upon. And I'm like, this is a moment for us to move that Titanic of our food system, at least here locally, particularly because, you can drive up I-35 and all you see is corn, to your point. It's all corn. And to your point, they don't eat that. None of those farmers eat that. And even if some of the small farmers wanted to go organic, if that was what they choose, it is so expensive and so cost prohibitive, and that keeps them out. So once again, like it's this another even classist system on top of the racism that keeps folks from either having their own small gardens or expanding their gardens because they can't get now the money, the capital to be able to buy more of the land. So, but I want to tee it up for Brenda. What would you like to add to this conversation?
I think that what I would see in reference to just working side by side, the small scale growers, is that the growers that look like me would have a market for their produce. Through this Farm to Food Pantry project that I'm working on, the growers are just so excited to have a market where they can maybe sell, dependent on the week, to a wholesale buyer, which is CU in this project, for the amount of $5,000. They're excited. And not only sell that amount of 5,000, that you hear the grower when he says that when you have a net 30, that doesn't work for me. But when you have a program where you're able to provide him his payment via direct deposit within 7 days, that works for him. When you allow the grower to share with you his market price, that's fair. That works for him. These growers are excited to be a part of this Farm the Food Pantry project because they don't have markets like this. And what concerns me is what's going to happen next year when maybe we don't have this Farm the Food Pantry project. What's going to happen to these growers? I'm excited about it now that I can speak with a minority grower from the Delta, and he says that I can bring so many pounds of sweet corn, squash, and he can tell me his fair market price. And I could say to him, yes, we'll take that. And then I can process the invoice. And for this minority grower, it's $6,000 a week. And then I can have the conversation with them. Give me a call on Thursday. Let me know what you're going to have next week. And maybe I'm looking at a bigger order. These growers are excited about this. And what concerns me is that next year, what are they going to do for markets? Some of them are still struggling with the lack of the infrastructure. And that's what really concerns me right now.
So I want to bring in, because once again, I feel like we keep coming back to this capital piece. This is where I think revenue-based financing comes in, and adopting revenue-based financing, patient capital that understands the cycle of farmers, right? That you have to put up a lot of upfront costs. You have to buy the seed, you have to buy the manure, you might have to buy other things in advance before you even see quote unquote return on investment, which is the thing that you planted, right? So really, you know, and this goes back to like rethinking what risk looks like and who's actually taking the risk. The farmer is taking the risk instead of saying that the investor is taking the risk. It's like, what's the risk if we don't grow this food? What's the risk of our community, you know, this food apartheid, as Davida was saying, continues. That's when you think you have uprisings now. Did we not learn from Mad Max? Like, what's going to happen if people are completely decimated from access? But I want to bring up move on to the next topic that we were going to talk about, and that is. And I'll tee this up for you, Eartharin. As a nation with such a deep food culture, and particularly with people of color, like food is very central to like our being and our existence. But that we are so distant, and I think Davida talked about this. We don't know what's going into our bodies. We don't know, you know, it's food. Everything is food stuff. You can have flavored food, any flavor you want, but you can't get that food that it actually is, right? I think of all the different potato chips of different flavors of potato chips. As a nation with such a deep food culture, but a distant, almost non-existent relationship to food, how does the food system discourse need to change, and what's the role of media, advertising, social media that can be used to shift that, and definitely include, you know, the notions around you know, narrative change or cooperative ownership? Like what should we be thinking about from those aspects? I think communications and media and marketing often gets left off the table, and I think that's also part of this change, that we need that as also part of the change.
Well, very much so. The reality is you're talking about the demand side. And too often in our communities, in low-income communities, the foods that are most conveniently available are high processed, high sugar, high calorie, low nutritional value foods that are lower cost. And what we need is back to what all of the panelists have been saying, that I've been so, that I've wrapped my arms around these comments of providing more access to nutritious food, but also supporting the conversations that drive demand for that more nutritious food. Too often, if you ask a child, do they want a cookie or an apple, in our community, they're going to choose the cookie. They're going to choose the hot chips, the blue juice that they can get from the corner store, because that's what That's what they've grown accustomed to eating. And we don't have the kind of the marketing that you just talked about, the kind of education in our schools, the kind of support at our churches for changing demand for food. So this goes back to that question of market. Let me make a little known point that
Yeah.
we saw 150% increase in online purchases of food. The CSA programs, box programs were all providing more online access to food, addressing those market issues that Brenda was talking about. But if you're a SNAP beneficiary, you can't use your EBT card to purchase food online. You can't use, unless you can purchase, there are some programs that will allow you to purchase from Walmart, from Amazon, and maybe the large grocers, but you can't purchase
Wow.
directly from farmers markets, from CSA organizations. And so we've been working with members of Congress to develop a bill that would support the expansion of that program to ensure that that access that we take for granted is given to those who depend upon the SNAP benefits to purchase food, that they can also purchase that more nutritious food. And so that's just one policy change, that could make a significant difference in providing a different type of access, providing an opportunity for accessing food that's otherwise not available. Because in too many of our communities, the choice for the less nutritious food is made because that's what's available. That's what's
affordable.
Yes.
Yeah, but part of the reason that that's what's available is because the distributors don't distribute there, because there is an implicit assumption, an implicit racist bias that if I bring fresh fruits and vegetables to a bodega, that they're not going to order enough, it's not going to be enough, and no one's going to buy it. And so there is a vicious cycle that happens. That is part of the reason why you see only like Takis and things like that at the bodegas, and you don't see fresh fruits and vegetables and organic milk and like anything else, which we know that these communities all want, because what they're doing is their money's leaving the neighborhood because they're going and getting it someplace else. So there's a real challenge there. I think the other piece I would just want to point out to everybody is just thinking about school food within this moment. Right, most kids, Black and brown kids in the United States, most of their calories are coming from school food. And the school food is lousy most places. It is not culturally relevant. It is not locally sourced, right? In this moment, what we've certainly seen here in Boston is the amount of hunger that's gone on, that's increased, because the only thing available still is like the crappy turkey wrap with some carrot sticks that you gotta walk a mile to get every single day to get your lunch. And that's the only thing that's available to you. And so as we look at this, to me, it comes back again to the economics and that we don't put real value on the real cost of food. And therefore we expect schools to feed a kid for, $2.25 a meal or whatever it is. And that's understanding that that's probably all the nutrition they're getting for the day. Well, fundamentally, if you just simply increase the value of what the USDA reimbursement could be, and you change the expectations, you could actually fix, for an awful lot of kids in this country, you could fix an awful lot about the diet-related issues that they have.
Well, and the current administration rolled back nutrition requirements for schools. So you put that on top of it. You have the one on top of the fact that these schools are buying from those companies like Cisco that you talked about. So once again, like this is all, this tornado effect that just is all interconnected. You can't separate the wheat from the shaft, right? It's all connected and parsecting. But going back to what Eartherwind was saying about policy, like this is just so important. And I think that sometimes with organizing, we don't place enough emphasis on the strategic part of it, the policy and making those relationships. Because in this case, what I, as a strategist by nature, I think about, okay, so what farmers associations does Earthwinds Group need to like hook up with so that when they go and talk to a representative, you are going on as a farming block and, you know, an entrepreneur, small business block. And like you have these 3 blocks. It's like, this is your constituency. You've got 3 blocks of your constituency coming to you. So what are you going to do? Right. And so just making that part of it. But I want to move on to, because I think that we're seeing in Minnesota particularly, and I think it's happening in other places. Actually, before I make that point, I want to talk a little bit about Mandela Foods, to that whole point that one of you made about people making the assumption that Black and brown people and poor people either don't want that food, can't afford that food. Mandela Market started off as a 1,200 square foot cooperative market in Oakland, right across the street from the BART stop. They actually spent a lot of time trying to get the space next door, which was a 99-cent store that was 10,000 square feet. The place sat vacant, I think, for 7 years, and they kept going to the city. Then 99-cent store came in. They were in there for 5. They were supposed to be in there for 10, but because of a lot of different things, decided to leave. And once again, the place sat vacant for another 5 years. Mandela Foods went back to the city again to try to get the property, and they finally got it. That was a couple of years ago. But this whole notion, what was great about what they did was they crushed the myth that people who they thought the government and the community thought could not afford it, did not want it, proved that was wrong. And I think these are the things that when we talk about media, these are the stories that we need to lift up. It's like, no, all of these stories are bull crap. Like there are actually people, I know I grew up in California. I grew up on healthy food. My mom was a vegetarian going back to the 70s. I remember when soy burgers came in a can, they were disgusting. But I grew up on healthy food, and I'm so thankful to my mom for that, because to this day, like to pass a fast food place, like the smell of it makes me physically ill. I just can't eat it. It just doesn't even, it's not attractive to me. I don't know how people eat it. I can't. But this whole thing of cooperative ownership, cooperatives coming up here in Minnesota, the thing that's being wrestled with is the food cooperative movement here in Minnesota has been predominantly white, even though its roots come from the Black South. And once again, I think Davida talked about it, like knowing our history, knowing where things, how we actually got here, and to understand how we need to undo it. So I'd love for you all to just kind of popcorn in and really talk about what are you seeing as far as the cooperative, Black cooperative movement, where you are, what is needed to undergird that or support those movements so that we can make them bigger and make them larger. So I'm just going to open the floor up.
You know, when you talk about the full value of food that's been spoken about by you as well as by Jen, that when you have farmers markets, the reality of it is many people who live in low-income communities who depend upon SNAP benefits can't necessarily afford to pay the price for a fresh tomato directly from the farm. You have the Double Up Bucks program that the federal government instituted to allow for the doubling of the value of the purchase. You can if you spend $1, you get $1, which will make food more affordable in farmers markets for low-income people. That program is always underfunded. It runs out of money every year. And so you don't have the opportunity for enough families to take advantage of the program. And so, yes, it is about creating more cooperatives, getting more people of color involved in these kinds of business opportunities that get more fresh foods into communities. But it's also about providing the policy support that will ensure that that food is available to all of the constituents in that community. It shouldn't just be someone who has a job that can afford nutritious food. Everyone should have access to afford nutritious food, ensuring that we have the right safety nets in place that provide enough access to capital so that you can purchase that food at a price that fully compensates that farmer, but also makes that food affordable to the consumer.
I would just say that like the answer about black owned co-ops is money, as it is with everything else. How do you underwrite it? Who's financing it? Under what circumstances? I think in this moment, and especially for the work that Brenda's doing and others are doing, this is the moment where we need to talk about what does it mean to be a values-aligned partner. And so when I say that, like, I think about for a farmer to make it in this moment, it's not about I don't think it's about the CSA and going to the public. I think that's a really helpful one. Like going direct to consumer, the margins are better, but these businesses need those wholesale accounts. So right now, you look at colleges, and the college supply chain is essentially shut down right now. So when it comes back on, what if especially in the public colleges, for God's sakes, this is public money. This is our money that's supporting them. What if we said to them, you must source and you must forward contract with local farms, with Black farmers, to provide the squash and the beets and the peppers to those farms? Because now the farmer has the ability to grow and know ahead what's coming. They can plant based on what the future holds. We know that colleges and K through 12 schools and hospitals and big corporations, every single one of them is buying a lot of food every single year. And they are not buying it locally. They are not buying it from business owners of color. They are not supporting that industry. They are doing it based on efficiency, simplicity, right? They want to do it in as few steps as possible. So a very simple thing for me from a policy perspective would be pushing all of our states and federal government to say that percentage of what our spend is needs to be on Black, Latinx, immigrant, indigenous owned businesses and farms to feed our communities.
And I think that just goes back to how we started with Davida, these anti-racist policies, or these moving away from a system that is built and perpetuated, leaving people out and leaving people on the margins and disenfranchising them and all of those things. So I love the fact that you all are giving like these very specific things. So I want to tee up, because I think Davida, in our conversation, you also talked about cooperatives. So I want to tee that up. And then after your comments, I think we're going to open it up for Q&A. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think, in this moment it's so interesting to me. And I think that I'm more convinced now than ever that Black history needs to be taught in schools beyond just Black History Month. And so when we have this conversation around cooperatives, I wish that more people were rooted and grounded and steeped in the history of cooperatives and understanding that the cooperative movement did come from Black farmers. And my God, if we actually really thought about like economic development and the building of cooperatives, we already have the blueprint. We already have a journey map laid out. Because I think one of the most brilliant, most intelligent, most important economic developers of our time has to be Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. Like, our ancestors already taught us this. And so there's no need to reinvent the wheel, because we have folks like Fannie Lou Hamer who taught us about cooperatives, not only in farming, but also how to build cooperative businesses and how to come together and begin to cooperatively pool our resources. We have Mr. Ben Burkett right now, who's still alive, who understands the basic theologies and principles and fundamentals of how to do this work in a very cooperative way, right? And so when I think about how do you actually realize, for those of us who are in food justice movement, and for those of us like my colleagues and comrades in the city of Detroit, who our mission and our goal is to move toward a food sovereign city. That means that the fruits and vegetables that we grow in the city of Detroit stays in the city of Detroit. We need to ensure that we have policies behind our goals and aspirations. And I think one of the most progressive policies that have been passed was passed by our U.S. Senator, which is Debbie Stabenow in Michigan. And the policy that she passed is the Urban Agriculture Act of 2016. So this was passed about 4 years ago, right? And that is so important because what this Urban Agriculture Act allows, it allows urban farmers to be counted in the census of agriculture. Because currently, right now, they aren't even counted in the census. And so when they are counted in the census, what that does is that gives them now full rights of our rural farmers through the USDA. And it allows them to receive government support, or dare I use the word subsidies, because many rural farms are subsidized. Our entire food system is undergirded by subsidies. So now urban farmers get the same rights and opportunities that rural farmers get government support. But here's what I love. Is that they also get support in order to do programs, school gardens, education, composting, etc. Because here's what I know about policy in terms of what motivates me around it is the policy or the push to get more cooperatives. It's the policy and push to get more nutritious food inside of our schools, where it's the policy and push to regulate how much marketing is marketed to Black and brown children, this unhealthy junk food. It starts through activism. And again, our ancestors has already shown us this. I think and harken back to the Black Panther creation. The United States of America didn't all of a sudden come up with the Child Nutrition Act of 1966. The whole free breakfast program, the United States of America just didn't decide one morning that they were going to provide free breakfast to poor Black and brown children in the country. They were embarrassed. They were shamed. They were pushed into doing it. And who did that? The Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party had the creation of the free breakfast program for children first. Because I come from ancestors who believe that if you can't feed our people, you can't lead our people. And so at the heart of any movement building in this country, it starts with food. And I think every institution in this country, whether it be churches, whether it be schools, whether it be businesses, should be thinking about what is their food strategy in order to bring in more people and to feed their community. And so I think that what I am seeing, particularly from the food justice and food activism world, is that this work has been going on for decades. And now it is starting to gain some traction. But Elaine, I tell you, I am fearful. And I'm keep telling this, I am fearful because we are not asking for enough to move the needle. And there's one thing that I lifted up in our call that I wanted to make sure that we don't forget and that I just wanted to put a pin in. And that is that don't tell me we can't create a robust, local, equitable food system, because the government has already shown its hand and they've already shown us what they can do. And the reason why I say that is that the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act, is the largest transfer of wealth in this country right now. It is the largest economic stimulus package in the history of the United States of America. And it amounted to 10% of the total U.S. gross domestic product, where we have a bill that is over $2 trillion. And of that $2 trillion, more than $250 billion of it was given to it was given in loans and grants to major industries. So don't tell me that they don't have the money. They have the money. Right. They got it. But we
That's
have
what
to
I
be
say
very
all the time.
clear in this food economy, when we're building out this food infrastructure, what is it that we want? What is it that we demand? What is it that we need? And then we go get it. I'm like Dr. King now. I'm ready to collect the check. The next time we need to get our money. Okay, and I understand that access to capital is a burden. Yes, it is. And I do believe we need to have this conversation around how do we access that capital, but I also want to hold the government responsible as well to undergird some of these businesses and farms through government money as well.
And that's all part of the capital conversation. I don't think that's separate, right? That is all included in that conversation. So I'm going to apologize to my Facebook folks because I've got to do these questions on my text messages. So I might drop you, but I'll bring you back on in just a hot second. So so I just want to lift up a couple of things. I want to drop a couple of shout outs. So Fannie Lou Hamer, I've done my recent genealogy, and it turns out my people are from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is where Fannie Lou Hamer is from. So shout out to Hattiesburg, hey, whoop, whoop. And my auntie is on Facebook Live here, so big shout out to her. But also I want to even shout out the Indigenous folks that are on my Facebook Live, because that is also, cooperative is also a part of Indigenous life, right? We are all in this together. There's no one person that is bigger than the whole. We need to look out the whole before the individual. And as a country that's founded on individualism, that's where we see the crash, right? The disconnect between the two. So let me get on my questions here. So I think what we'll do, because we have very limited time with the questions, I might just tee this up for a couple of you, and then we'll move on to the next question. So first question, what small steps can we do that can create a big impact with dealing with inner city food desert? So this is more specific to like, or food apartheid, as Davida has said. And maybe I'll kick it up to Davida and to Jen.
Yeah, Jen, you want to go first?
No, go. You got it.
Yeah, I think, I think that when I think about these cities, neighborhoods, in my hometown of Detroit that are living under food apartheid, I really think, again, y'all, I keep going back to systems, and I keep going back to policies. And so the reason why we call it food apartheid and we don't call it food desert is because there's nothing natural about a city, about a community, about a neighborhood that does not have quality, healthy food, that it was all created. And so when you ask the question around what are some of the simple steps that we can take, is that I think that folks are missing the moment if they disconnect the fact that when we see folks out on the streets who are shouting, who are demanding, who are saying out loud as, oh my goodness, as a nation, really all across the world, that Black Lives Matter, that you really can't miss this moment. And that means you cannot disconnect the fact that for 8 minutes and 43 seconds, a knee was placed on the neck of Mr. Floyd. And what folks need to realize is that a knee has been placed on the necks of Black communities since forever. And that has happened as a result of redlining, segregation, right? The exploitation of Black folks, and also the extraction of resources taken out of our communities to build up other communities. And so some small steps that folks can take is to, first of all, understand the deep embedded racist policies that have created the communities that we see, particularly Black and brown communities that we see today. And then what I want folks to do as well is to, when you're traveling, because I've noticed a lot of crowdfunding campaigns, a lot of people are posting on Instagram and social media and Facebook who support Black businesses, right? Which is great, wonderful, right? Support Black businesses, particularly those who have never supported Black businesses before. And then as you travel into Black and brown communities to support Black businesses, I want you to open your eyes and I want you to pay attention. I want you to pay attention, particularly if you're white and you're coming from the suburbs, as you're traveling into communities, pay attention that why is it in Black and brown communities, you tend to see some of the same real estate strategies. That means you tend to see a pharmacy on every corner. Next to the pharmacy, you might see a fast food restaurant or a liquor store or someplace that is selling the lotto. And then next to that, you might see a dialysis center. I want you to open your eyes and start asking the question, why are these communities created the way that they are created, right? And
hey,
then I want you to take
a Black woman, but we've got like 4 or 5 minutes, and I've got like 4 or 5 more questions.
In these communities, you have to think about what policies have been created. So what I mean by that, and I'll close in terms of these little steps that you can take, and that is our need for you to pay attention in terms of how you vote. So don't tell me that, oh my goodness, I'm an ally to Black and brown people. I'm not racist, but yet still, when it comes for you to vote, for a millage that may create a regional transit system where Black and brown people can begin to travel through bus, through high-speed rail out of their communities into the suburbs, you vote against it. Why is that? Don't tell me you're not racist when you make a decision that you're not going to live in a community because you don't want your children to go to school with another Black child or another brown child, right? So you create and pass laws and legislation in your neighborhood to ensure that Black and brown people do not move into your community. And so there are key things that people need to be paying attention to, the way that they vote, right? The places where they live, the schools that they send their children to, their purchasing dollar, that all contributes, right, to this creation of food apartheid.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hate to cut off a Black woman, but we got so many questions here. And Jen, I'm going to skip you just so we can get through at least maybe one or two of these questions. So I think this question might be for Eartharin and for Brenda. What opportunities exist to create cooperative investment in farmers and food entrepreneurs of color in the form of lending circles? Is there a way to build a flourishing food economy outside of the mainstream system?
Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing is that I know that currently with the project that I'm working on, the Farm the Food Pantry, and I'm so excited that I'm working with a Black co-op, and they've been extremely great to work with. And I think that what we've talked about through this dialogue or through this conversation is some of the same things in reference to not having the ample amount of capital, not having the market access. And so if you really want to help, I think you can start there in reference to being able to help a small minority co-op get the capital that they need, whether it's for a refrigerated truck or for on-farm cooling. These are some of the simple steps that other larger farms have that a lot of small minority co-ops are struggling for.
Thank you. Eartharin, can you keep it down to 60 seconds because they're telling me to kind of wrap things up here.
Okay, very quickly. I think across every stage, we need a variety of diverse capital. We need small funders that financing circles that you've described that can support idea stages and acceleration and incubation. Too often, businesses are started by support from angel investors that are friends and family. And we need to become those friends and family that are supporting food businesses in our communities. But we also need to ensure that high net worth individuals, foundations, as well as de-risk venture capital and government money is supporting the opportunity to grow businesses. We need to get beyond subsistence enterprises to businesses that can provide the economic development opportunities in our community, as well as providing access to more nutritious and affordable food.
Well, I'm going to begin to wrap it up there because I think that is a really great, I want to make a shout out to Swift Foundation. I know Ford Foundation recently came out and said, to your point about philanthropic dollars, they've recently come out to talk about that they're moving to a larger payout than the minimum 5% that the IRS requires philanthropic organizations to give out, 5% of their corpus. And I believe they said that they're moving to 10%. But I want to give a shout out to Swift Foundation, which is the board that I sit on. We actually made that decision 2 years ago and are already expanding our philanthropic giving beyond the 5%. As well as our investment portfolio is almost, I believe, I want to say it's 70 to 80% invested in indigenous food and food sovereignty as it relates to indigenous communities here in the United States and the global South. So I think to your point about capital, if you really mean something, and to Davita's point, if you really have been moved, I call it the white awakening that's happening. If you've been really moved by the current events, move your money. That's really what it comes down to. And family offices, I think, are a big piece of that. Family offices are far more flexible than philanthropic organizations. It's literally one or two people's decision in that family office to move that money. So I'm going to put out a challenge to family offices to really get behind this with your dollars and find out who are the people in your community. You've got 4 of them here on this panel that you can contact to find out what's happening in those communities. And I'm sure we all know other people in other communities that we can connect you to. So I want to thank my panelists. You all been always amazing. I love it. I got to meet a new friend, Eartharin. And so I hope to follow up with her. I want to thank AEO and Connie for having me here. Once again, I want to thank Roland Martin's team, the sponsors, the AEO staff. I know you all been working hard, sleepless nights, so please give them a round of applause. If you see them, buy them a spa day. They've been out here in these streets corralling all of us panelists. So thank you very much. Appreciate all of you. Be well, be safe, and support Black. Thank you.
What good is a conference without a conference recap? It's hard to believe that we started this journey weeks ago, talking about resilient small businesses strengthening local economies. Let's look at what we discovered and ideated together on. Day one kicked off with our theme, resilient small businesses strengthening local economies, with our flagship sponsor, Wells Fargo, followed by a dynamic panels with journalist Soledad O'Brien, city leaders, microbusiness industry leaders, and small business owners. Day two, women, wealth, and entrepreneurship, with powerhouses Lisa Price, Margaret Anadu of Goldman Sachs, and our friend Nellie Galan. Don't forget about Del Gines from the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, who brought up the rear. Day three, equitable entrepreneurship, with a keynote from Stephen DeBerry, and incredible panelists Philip Gaskin from Kaufman, Abigail Golden Vasquez from Aspen Institute, and our Vision and Voices Town Hall led by Roland Martin and panelists such as Tulane Montgomery. Day four, preparing entrepreneurs, equipping practitioners, led by our very own Hyacinth Vassell, Stacy Klein from GoDaddy, and of course, we can't thank enough the panel that came after, Mitch Jacobs, who brought facts and data as we led into a conversation of policy with John Stanford and guests like Jesse Van Tol. Day five, Show Me the Money Philanthropy, kicked off with Susan Taylor Batten with the keynote, followed by our co-chair, Michaelia Davis, leading a panel with panelists such as Otis Riley of the Rockefeller Foundation, and many more. Soledad O'Brien joined us again with serial entrepreneur Catherine Finney. Day six, Black Business Restart, Recovery, and Renewal, with our flagship sponsor, Regina Hayward from Wells Fargo, and a panel led by Janelle Williams of the Atlanta Fed. Day seven, our very own Connie Evans, President and CEO, led a panel about underwriting in a COVID-infused recession, followed by a panel led by Astrid Schultz, who talked about the lending pipeline. Did I lie? We've been busy. And now, let's move on to learn about some of the innovations we're doing here at the Association for Enterprise Opportunity. Hyacinth, over to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are so pleased today to Hi. So I'd like to introduce to you some of our tools through our AEO Innovations Hub. For those of you who don't know about our Innovations Hub, it is a central point for the introduction of new methods, tools, products, services, and ideas into the small business ecosystem for the purpose of creating impact in the market. And today we have a few new tools to share with you today. The first is our Knowledge Center. We may be having a little difficulty. Yeah. One moment. So while they're working on that, I'll tell you a little bit about the Knowledge Center. AEO and its partners are really on the forefront of creating economic opportunity for entrepreneurs and their communities. The AEO Knowledge Library provides the opportunity to access data and research that can inform your work, and the opportunity to share your own insights on creating equitable progress for Main Streets. We curated white papers, articles, report for economic development, small business practitioners and organizations, and you can access this all in one place. Are we able to share the tool yet? So my staff is to be showing the screen. Are we able to get share their screen so they're able to see the tool? All right. So while we are working on that, I'll talk to you about some of the other tools while they are working on getting that up on the screen as well. Some of the other tools that we have is the Tapestry Innovation Registry, which we're extremely proud of. The aim of the registry is to increase the visibility of Black business development initiatives and communicate their aggregate success and identify new opportunities to advance and accelerate these activities. We have, I believe, 51 organizations that are in our inaugural registry submissions that we'll be able to show you shortly. And for those who are interested in joining the registry and applying for that, we will be providing the link so that you can do that. This registry is really for those that are able to show 50% or more of their programs that they have that are helping to support Black business development. Let me check in again. Are we able to show our screen? Are you show our screen of the register, the Knowledge Center? All right, so while they're working on that, seems like we're still having a little technical difficulty. I will talk to you about the next tool that we have, which is our COVID-19 Resource Navigator. And this tool, when you think about the small businesses as a result of COVID-19, they've had to weed through a myriad of resources to try to figure out where am I getting, where can I get loans from? What kind of grants are out there to support me? What laws or policies that I need to make sure that my businesses are following? And having to figure this out from state to government to federal, weeding through all of those resources, you know, what small business support is there for me to help me to respond and recover from the impact of COVID-19. So what this Resource Navigator helps to do is to help that small business pinpoint the information that they need. right? It is, so what we have done is we have basically pulled together all of the information and resources from credible and reputable sources to ensure that small business ecosystem is able to respond and recover and stabilize and not have to spend a lot of their time fishing through information to figure out what is specific to their business. So if the business is looking for business development, if they're looking for trusted guidance, we're able to pinpoint specific services that's available for their specific need. Let's say they were looking for e-commerce, for instance, and they're trying to figure out, where do I go to build my digital presence? This resource navigator will help them to be able to pinpoint those resources exactly. And just to help you to understand more about the registry, if a Black-owned small business is out there and is trying to figure out, I'm a tech business and I need to understand what resources are out there specifically for me, that is where I can go and find other businesses that are like me as well. This registry helps them to find that. If we have foundations who are trying to find practitioners who serve specifically or have programs designed specifically for Black-owned businesses, these practitioners are able to find that. And what great place to aggregate all of these resources so that they can be amplified in one directory. And then finally, I'm hoping that our technology would be up soon. Any word? Okay. So I'm wondering, so what we will do, I'll also go into the final resource that we'll have, and hopefully by then we were able to show you them, because we're incredibly excited about all of these tools. So one of the tools that we do have is it's a report. Most of you have seen reports online, you've seen reports in hard copy. So what we have done is we have curated 2 surveys, one to small business across the country and another to practitioners serving small businesses. And this survey is to really help to better understand the impact of COVID-19. The survey highlights the challenges businesses and service providers are facing, and the actions they have taken in response to the pandemic. Also, AEO sought to better understand the supports business owners are seeking during the pandemic in order to respond, stabilize, and recover. Overall, AEO received responses for over 1,100 individuals and nearly 50 practitioners. And these, the report that we have will showcase this tool. Let me check one more time and see where we are. Okay. So as you're thinking about these tools that we have here, you're saying, where in the world did AEO come up with this? Why is AEO come up with all of these tools? All of these tools is to help the practitioners, to help you to better serve the entrepreneurs that you are working with. If anyone wants to be able to take our survey, we will be putting the link in our chat for everyone to also have an opportunity to fill out the survey. As you've heard from our food panel and our different panels throughout the conference of the different myriad of challenges that businesses are facing as a result of COVID-19. So we want to be able to amplify that. And it's powerful information, right? So we want to be able to share that with policymakers or decision makers, so that they're hearing from these small business practitioners. So let me check in here. Okay, perfect. I am incredibly excited here. So I am so pleased to introduce to you our AEO's Knowledge Library. Again, just to refresh for you, this is where you can go to get research, to get data, to help you to inform the work that you're doing. So let's get started. Katie? So if you're a member or a partner organization, let's click on that. And here, you're seeing here, there is a lot of different reports, white papers, articles from economic development organizations, small business practitioners, and so forth. These are all curated from different practitioners across the U.S. You can access the Knowledge Center to inform your work. So let's go on now to the registry. And as I mentioned earlier, the registry is really aimed at increasing the visibility of Black business development initiatives. It communicates their aggregate success and identify new opportunities. So let's get started. Katie.
Quick introduction. So as Hyacinth mentioned, we are thrilled to announce that 51 organizations are part of our inaugural launch of the registry. Over the past year, we have performed a rigorous selection process to identify organizations across the United States that have programs to get dedicated to support Black business development. So real quick, we're going to do an overview of how to utilize this tool. So when you are using the online registry, you can see the various search functionalities to find organizations that are either in your neck of the woods or across the nation. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, you can search on topics such as types of service, industry served, and even look for organizations located that are, I guess, at different business stages. They cater maybe more to more startups versus those who are a bit more established. And if you scroll back up to the top, you'll see where you could search for the city and state area. If you also already know some of the names of the organizations that are in the registry, you can put a name into the resource name section and hit search, and they will populate. So to give you a quick flavor of what is on a registry site, we're going to go onto the Village Micro Fund section of the registry. And here you're just going to see some information that has been submitted. You'll see a quick introduction into the types of programs that are offered. You'll also see a breakdown on the right-hand side of kind of more of those bullet-pointed program offerings. And if you continue to scroll down, you'll see how they deliver their programming, in what areas their programming is located in. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll also see the cost related to programs. If we scroll a little up, you'll also see that we have included a few stories from those who have gone through programming with Village Micro Fund. So this is kind of the basic structure to give a bit of a flavor for these registry applicants. And if we stay on that page real quick, if we scroll down, we'll be able to see if you want to get in touch, you can just click the Contact Now button at the top. Right there, and that'll bring you to their website in order to get in touch with them for those services. So let's go back out to the main registry page. Hyacinth had mentioned this a little while ago. If we hit Tapestry Registry at the top, as we mentioned, if we scroll down, there are 51 organizations that are currently in this inaugural launch of the registry. We are thrilled to have them, but we want this registry to continue to grow. So if you think that your organization is a possible fit for this registry platform, please submit and apply. You can also, by clicking on the link below, you can nominate other organizations that are in your area so that we can consider them for the registry. So with that very brief overview, I'm going to kick it back to Hyacinth.
Thank you, Katie. So let's, for all of those out there who know about other practitioners, please nominate them. If you don't want to nominate, please let others know about it, because we want to have this registry filled with practitioners that are serving Black-owned businesses. So now let's go to our next tool, which is our COVID-19 Resource Navigator. And again, now for practitioners, you're probably saying to yourself, well, how am I going to use this? Well, I know you guys are always looking for loans, you're looking for grants for respective organizations. You're working tireless hours. So use this tool to identify other opportunities for your small businesses. And guess what? If there's something that's not on here that you're aware of, please let us know. We will be happy to add it on there. So again, now let's get started. Katie?
Sure. So you'll see that the navigator is broken down currently into 4 different sections. We're just going to bring you down a few of these paths today so you can get a feel for how you would utilize this tool. So we're going to go down the first path right now, that is business support. When we click on that, you can see right now we've organized resources under 6 different categories. So let's just go ahead and click on the Increase My Digital Presence category for right now. You can see that we have other opportunities as well. You can either get it as a course or there's other webinar series. For right now, let's just hit that I want to increase my digital presence utilizing a course. Great, so you can kind of see where this path brought us to this final result. It brings us to the Empower by GoDaddy program, which is a series of courses that allow entrepreneurs to create or establish and then increase their digital presence. So you'll see that there's a link that can be clicked on, and that will bring you out to that resource in order to sign up for it. So super simple, you're just following the steps on screen. If we can start over, let's go down one of those other original paths. So as we just did that business support path, so let's go ahead and look at the grants path. I know that small businesses and practitioners are tirelessly looking for grants. So we have curated this pathway to help you more easily identify grants that are available. So under here, you can see that there's still a number of categories that you can select. Let's go ahead and look at grants that are specific for women-owned small businesses. When we click on that, you can see we actually have a number of opportunities available for women-owned businesses that are looking for grants. So similar to how we saw with the digital presence path, you just click on the link to get some more information, and then you can sign up for those opportunities. So it's pretty simple. It's literally, again, just following the steps on the screen, and it'll take you to these available opportunities that either you as a small business can take advantage of, or as a practitioner, you can direct your entrepreneurs to these different opportunities. So let's go ahead and start over one more time. So again, we have things organized under these 4 buckets. If you're not looking for business support services, a loan, or a grant, let's go ahead and click Other. And this is where it's going to bring you to a page where we're asking you to submit information about what you need. We are constantly evolving this navigator. We want to make sure that we're getting you the resources that you need. So if you fill out this form, we'll be monitoring this so that we can try to figure out how we can bring in those services that you need into this navigator so that you are able to best kind of stabilize and begin to grow again in this COVID-19 world that we're living in. So that was a really quick and dirty brief overview of the navigator. I encourage you all to go in and play around with this tool. This probably only showed about 2% of the opportunities that are out there. There's a lot of stuff in that navigator that you can direct your entrepreneurs towards. So with that, Hyacinth's going to pass it back to you again.
Thank you. And this navigator was developed due to the generous donation of Fifth Third Bank. So we want to thank them for their generous donation. And for those of you who are on here, please don't forget to share. We don't want to keep this navigator a secret. And in addition, if there are tools or resources that we are unaware of, please let us know. So now let's get to our survey. This is a wonderful tool that we are just extremely proud of to show you. And this is our COVID-19 survey. And I've mentioned earlier that we fielded 2 surveys, one for practitioners and one for entrepreneurs. We want to hear how the entrepreneurs are impacted as a result of COVID-19 and what they're saying to us. So let's get started, Jessica, and let's click on our COVID-19 entrepreneur survey and walk our guests through it.
The COVID-19 Resource Navigator that was just presented was really motivated and informed by our own research. And so when COVID-19 first hit the US, AEO really wanted to understand the impact that it was having on the entire small business ecosystem, from the small business owners themselves to the service providers that are working with them, and also the lenders that are providing them with the much needed financial support to help small businesses kind of stay afloat during these tough times. And so again, we've fielded these 2 surveys, one to the small business owners and the other to the small business practitioners. And they really highlighted the numerous challenges that both groups are facing in navigating through the current crisis, and what supports they have sought and resources that they need to help them stabilize, shift, and succeed during these tough times. So again, we're really excited to share with you today these 2 reports. You can find them on aeoworks.org/COVID-19 survey, and I'm sure the conference team will plug those links in the chat for you. So we have both reports on this landing page, and very briefly, I can walk you through some of the content that both have. I'm going to skip through all of the executive summary and about us sections and just dive right into the data here. And I'll make this full screen just so it's easier to see. So our entrepreneur survey has a wealth of data here on things like how long business owners could survive without any incoming cash flow, for example. And you'll see these red bars here indicate that the situation really isn't that great for entrepreneurs, which I'm sure doesn't really come as a surprise given all of the conversations that we've been having so far throughout the conference. It also includes information on the economic impact that COVID-19 has had on small businesses, including things like changes in revenue as a result of the pandemic. And again, here we see just the sheer amount of devastation that the pandemic has been wreaking on business revenues. More than half of business owners have seen dramatic reductions in revenue of 50% or more, or even revenue declines so high that they've needed to shut down as a result. We've captured a lot of the challenges that small business owners are facing during the pandemic. Things like cash flow, making strategic business decisions, determining how to pay bills, things like that. We've also asked them what sorts of actions they are taking in order to adjust to these new circumstances, including cutting costs where they can, employee layoffs, building digital presence, and other interesting and innovative ideas that show that businesses are really adapting or trying to adapt to these difficult times. And lastly, for the entrepreneur survey, we've asked them what sort of support they have sought so far, including SBA relief like the EIDL loans and the PPP loans, federal and state grants, and other financial assistance. But we see that there's still a gap that appears for these small business owners. We still have a huge unmet need in terms of financial assistance like grants, payroll funds, loans, rent money, and things like that. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out that business owners outside of this financial assistance really need counseling and advice on just how to operate in this new world that we're living in. So they've also indicated that, business counseling services, online marketing support, and things like that are also essential. So we know that the combination of the financial assistance and this trusted guidance is going to be critical for them as we move forward. Now, in terms of the organizational impact survey, and I'm sure a lot of you are not going to find this very surprising, but we're seeing a lot of folks who are working with entrepreneurs during these times having huge increases in their requests from new clients as well as from existing clients. And this is putting a huge strain on organizational capacity. So there's limited resources at these organizations to meet this increased demand. We have some information on the different types of support services that clients are seeking. So again, no surprise here that a lot of it is financial assistance, but we're also seeing things like accounting services, online marketing support, legal assistance, and things like that. We also asked our practitioners about their operational challenges and their challenges with serving clients. We saw a number of different things here, but on the operational side of things, the focus was mostly on maintaining staff morale, making sure that folks are aligned, even though that they were working remotely, trying to get everyone on the same page in terms of client services and priorities and things like that. But in terms of serving clients, there were a lot of folks that expressed the fact that they had limited staff resources to meet that increased demand for support. But they're also facing challenges related to providing those services to their clients online, just in terms of the technology demands for their staff, as well as for the entrepreneurs that they were serving. So with that, I'm going to go back to the Entrepreneur Impact Survey, and I'm going to show you a really fun feature of this report that as a data nerd, I'm really excited about. So these reports, both of them are fully interactive, which means that if you're navigating through the report and you see a data point that really captures your interest, you can click on it, and the rest of the data on that page is going to filter to show you only the responses for the people that selected that option that you were interested in. So on this page, for example, we have this data point here where the business owner has no savings and can't really survive without any incoming cash flow. Let's say I'm interested in learning more about that group. I can click on it, and all of a sudden you'll see that the data on that page has changed. And all that's doing is it's showing me the number of full-time employees and the annual business revenue only for those survey respondents that had no savings prepared for the COVID-19 crisis. We can also select multiple groups of interest. So let's say I'm interested in all of those businesses that didn't have enough support in order to survive for more than a month. I can hold down Control and select multiple figures there. So that's really exciting to me. The other thing that is really cool about these reports is that if you are interested in a specific subgroup of business owners, let's say you're interested in a specific industry, or maybe you want to know what things look like in your state, we have this cool report filters page where you can immediately go and you can select what particular subgroup of businesses you're interested in, and it will automatically filter all of the data in the report for that specific group. So we've been talking a lot about Black entrepreneurs throughout the conference. If I were to go and select Black-owned businesses, I can go through the report now, and all of this data here is now presented only for Black-owned businesses. So I'm really excited about this resource. I really encourage you guys to check out these reports and play around with the data and really make it your own and make it useful to your specific context. Go out, use this with your advocacy efforts and things like that. And again, we really hope that this will be useful to a lot of folks. The last thing that I will say is, I think Hyacinth mentioned this before, but the other exciting thing about these reports is that the data is live. We are constantly updating the data as we get new responses to our survey. So check back often here. And I'd also encourage you all, I know we have a lot of practitioners in the audience. If you haven't already filled out the survey, I'm going to have the conference team drop in a link for our practitioner survey. If you have 5 minutes, I encourage you to fill it out, share your stories with us, and help us build the resources that we have available. And then if you know business owners, if you work with business owners, we'll also drop in the entrepreneur survey link into the chat as well. And again, we hope this will be helpful, and we're looking forward to seeing these resources grow.
Thank you, Jessica. I'd like to go back to the registry to give a more of a glance at how we can really see some of the Black some of the organizations that is serving Black-owned entrepreneurs. So let's click on Get Started. And Katie, I'd love for you to walk us through, if I was trying to look for a specific industry, show our viewers some of the other organizations and some of their features there.
Sure. So if we're going to go and we want to look on a specific industry, we're going to look on the left-hand side of the screen and come down to this area where it says Industry Served. So let's go ahead and click on Construction. And then you can start to see that this is automatically filtering on those organizations that said that they serve clients in the construction industry, or they have programs that are specifically catered to the construction industry. There's a lot of certification help that I've seen come through. So let's go ahead and we can even add another filter on here. Let's go ahead and if we go up a bit on the left-hand side, let's do one-on-one business advising and click that filter. So this brings it a bit different, and if you scroll down, we can see all of these organizations that provide one-on-one business counseling to those who are to entrepreneurs in the construction industry. There's a lot of different opportunities available here. Let's do a different functionality. If we can clear these filters. Great, and let's go ahead. Let's say we want to do New York City, or just we can type in New York on the left, on the city or area. So if we scroll down a bit, we can start to see those organizations that are located in New York, and we can click on any of these to see what specific programs they offer. So we can just go ahead and click on one. Can we click on Urban Upbound? Just to see, this is similar to what we showed earlier. You have, when you click on the page, you get to see the brief summary of the programs that they offer. You'll also on the right-hand side be able to see the type of offerings, broke it down by bullet points. So if you're scanning real quick, just look at the right-hand side. You can also see that their programs are free. And if you want to get in contact with them, you just hit that Contact Now button. And that will pop up in their website. So let's go ahead and go back. If we want to just do one more search, let's go ahead and say we're looking target communities, let's say returning citizens. Great. And then can we also put up in the search, we can do these by city or state. Let's also just put in New York again. And then I think hit search. So now you can see organizations that say that they had programming specifically for returning citizens, and they're located in New York. So you can see that list got a bit shorter. But any of these organizations provide opportunities and programs for returning citizens.
Thank you. And so this registry tool was brought to us by for the wonderful donation of Fifth Third. So we want to thank them for this generous donation so that we are able to amplify organizations who are supporting Black-owned businesses. So it's a pretty cool tool. So I hope that those who are out there that we're not aware of, that you will either nominate or you will either sign up for this tool. So let's now go back to the Knowledge Center, because I want you to really see some of the white papers and tools that we have there. And the Knowledge Center was brought to us by the generous donation of Woodforce and Wells Fargo. So we are really thankful for their generous donation. So these tools can be available to you. So let's go ahead and see some of the white papers that's there, so that our practitioners can access that. So let's click on it. So here you see a white paper forced to walk a dangerous line, consequences of debt in the Black communities. What if I did, when you pull it open here, it's you'll see the full report here that you can scroll down and see that, or you can download it if you need to. Let's scroll down and see what else our viewers are able to do. So here you're seeing some tags. So best practices, racial equity. And let's click on racial equity and see what happens here. And here we're having more white papers that are white papers and also research that's available on those specific topics. let's see if we can research stuff on CDFIs. Well, let's try to do, and let's see what we found. Let's look at microbusiness. And there you can see the report on microbusiness. So you're able to search and filter as well to be able to get to the specific information that you need. So we want to thank all of our partners and our sponsors for their generous donations. So these tools are available to you. So just before I wrap up today, we have our giveaway announcement. So each week we have been giving away an amazing giveaway courtesy of our sponsors. I can't get them, so I may as well announce it to you. This giveaway is a pair of Bose headphones, and the winner is Peng Zhang. Congratulations. The conference team will contact you shortly. And now over to Malika Davis, the conference co-chair and director of Inclusive Economies at CERGNA Foundation.
Hey y'all. My name is Michaelia Davis, and I am the director of the Inclusive Economies program at the CERGNA Foundation. I am also the co-chair of AEO's 2020 virtual conference alongside Melissa Bradley and Valerie Mosley. And I come to bring you farewell greetings. You've joined us for 4 weeks of really compelling content and conversations, where each week we had over 40,000 viewers. Wow. And you all joined us to hear from dozens of speakers, including renowned journalists, entrepreneurs, founders, community development financial institutions, nonprofit lenders, commercial lenders, impact investors, venture capitalists, institutional investors, but most importantly, you. You all showed up as an audience virtually for over 4 weeks to engage in the ideas that are going to support small businesses to continue to be the cornerstone of our communities and our economy. We want to thank the 16 sponsors that allowed AEO to transform what is traditionally known as a very dynamic in-person convening to an incredible virtual platform that includes Wells Fargo as a flagship sponsor, BB&T SunTrust, Fifth Third Bank, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the CERGNA Foundation as presenting sponsors, JP Morgan Chase as a premier sponsor, PayPal, WK Kellogg, Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation as market sponsors, GoDaddy and Square as ecosystem supporters, and friends of AEO, including Silver Lining, Prosperity Now, People Fund, Appalachian Community Capital, and Southern Bancorp. You know, stay in touch with AEO, right? These conversations don't need to end here. You can continue to engage and support this important work. You can find AEO online at aeoworks.org, and that's also the handle for all of their social media platforms. And just note that, AEO represents over 1,700 diverse partners and organizations, and, a set of actors who are moving capital, who are creating new policies and developing services that support entrepreneurs and the organizations that serve entrepreneurs. And lastly, none of this would have been possible if it were not for the AEO staff and the conference team. A lot of what we see is made possible through the hard work of AEO staff members who we don't get to see every day, under the sharp and determined leadership of Connie Evans. Please take a moment to raise a glass, tip your fro, and give a shout out to the staff and the production team who created a space that allows us to explore an economy where small businesses can come through stronger and more resilient than ever. So thank you for joining. Take care of yourselves, take care of your communities, and let's take these ideas into action. All right, y'all. Peace.
It's hard to believe our time has come to an end. From amazing conversations, to great giveaways, to even a happy hour together. I'll miss being in your living room, and I'm sure you'll miss being in mine. But more important, I'll miss the conversations that we had. I encourage you to remember that one saying, that one question, that prompts you to action and to movement. On behalf of the entire team, the conference team, thank you. We look forward to seeing you in person at our next conference. Corey Briscoe, out.